we're going to give our top 5 all-time X-Files episodes. Ani, what are yours?
Yeah, so my number 1 is Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man. That's season 4, episode 10. This is the anti-Forrest Gump. It's a personalization of 20th century history, but with a scheming conspirator rather than all-American innocent at the center of that history. So it even openly riffs on the Chocolates monologue, so they're clearly aware of the similarity. And then there's my number 2 is Humbug, season 2, episode 20, which is a portrayal of a freak show, which could have gone so very wrong, but did manage to humanize the guest characters without sacrificing either dark humor or scares. And this is also the first straight comedy episode, like that had jokes, but this was the first really full-on comedy episode. So the beginning of that excellent trend. My number 3 is Jose Chung's From Outer Space, which is season 3, episode 20, which is probably the most definitive self-parody episode in terms of its popularity and recognition. It's very meta, and I'm partial to the self-parody, as was probably pretty clear. Number 4, it's a bit of a different one, Home, season 4, episode 2, which is kind of a nice riff on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it infamously never got rerun by Fox. But yeah, I'm a bit of a gore hound, so I enjoyed that one.
They try to change the way things are. Let them know this is our home, and this is the way it's gonna stay.
And then my number 5 is Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, season 3, episode 4, which is a nice little existentialist comedy. And the climax also terrified me as a kid. My parents wouldn't let me watch it, but when I caught that episode, they were right, because I was completely terrified that I was going to get killed. But anyway, so that's the top 5. Not surprisingly, there are no reboot episodes on my list. But a special mention does go to The Lost Art of Forehead Sweat, the Mandela Effect one, which we've talked about, and also to season 6's Triangle, which is Chris Carter's most technically impressive directing effort. You have these long tracking shots making up whole scenes and amazing split screen sequences. And it also involves Mulder beating up Nazis. So that's definitely a fun and a solid special mention. And if you happen to care for lists or for the X-Files, you can find my top 10 with slightly more detailed takes on my fandom blog, which is at occasionalreviews.wordpress.com.
Well, you beat me to some of mine. Of course, Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. I would watch that every time it came on reruns. And Jose Chung, of course. So many layers to that one. Even some great, finally, some knowing nods to Twin Peaks in that one. And Musings of the Cigarette Smoking Man. And I love the whole end where he's talking about the box of chocolates.
So good. Yeah.
Can you remember it?
I'm going to look it up. Cigarette Smoking
Okay, I'm going to go with the rest of mine while you look that up.
It's very funny.
I'm going to say The Unnatural, where the shape-shifting Gray played on the Negro League team, and he was being hunted by the bounty hunter guy, and that one was written and directed by Duchovny, and it was clearly a take on the movie The Natural with Robert Redford. And I think, what was the first one that Toombs was in? Stretch? Squeeze? Yeah, I was going to say Stretch. Yeah. Squeeze. The Host with the Fluke Man. The comics really followed that one up really well and explained where the Fluke Man came from. But of course, the damn show undid the canon. And Unusual Suspects was also one that I really liked because they brought back X. And they crossed over with the show I used to watch that was by the creator of The Wire, It's called Homicide: Life on the Streets, and they met Detective Bunch, who is played by Richard Belzer, the stand-up comedian, who is a real UFO and conspiracy junkie nut in real life. And the lone gunmen meet him in Baltimore, and again, it's a human experimentation conspiracy that they all get involved in. And what's also significant about this one is by having the Detective Munch in this one, this actually put the X-Files in the Tommy Westphal shared universe hypothesis created by the late comic book writer Dwayne McDuffie that posits that about 90% of American TV shows that you could probably chart out, there's some really good maps on which shows exist in this continuity. And basically all these shows exist in the mind of the little autistic boy on St. Elsewhere. And it's really cool if you watch the last episode of St. Elsewhere, links them all. And I would ignore the reboot if not for the lost art of forehead sweat, because and I would have ended the show with that one. I think I would have done a shorter season and made that the end and kind of cut out the other stuff, because I think the one thing we didn't mention was the thing that they did, which was always a long-term problem with the continuity and the myth arc and standalone episodes, is they retconned the finale of the 10th season in the opener of the 11th season and said it was all a vision or a dream of Scully, and that whole invasion didn't happen yet.
Yeah. How did they come back after like 15 years and not have a plan for the plot?
Exactly.
Like, Carter had time to work out like a plot arc across 2 seasons, but then he just hit the reset switch again.
What about the worst episode? I would say First Person Shooter or Fight Club.
So my answer here might be more controversial, and I'm going to ignore the many mediocre Monster of the Week episodes, and also those from the post-Mulder era, because empty filler at least can be easily forgotten, whereas it's harder to forget my pick, which is Postmodern Prometheus, a pretentious and condescending piece of award bait. And I think basically you'd had these excellent comedy episodes, and Chris Carter wanted in on that and tried to do one, and it was just
and there's word that he was jealous of Darren Morgan and his brother and Wong, and some of them were pushed out over to Millennium and over to Space Above and Beyond, because he did want them over at X-Files getting all the Emmys.
Yeah. No, clearly much better writers. So this episode, it kind of starts mocking its fans as tabloid reading hicks. Then there's this attempt at a populist happy ending, but that to me still comes across as fundamentally condescending. I really loathe it. And
the obsession with Cher, I mean, was that a reference to the movie with the mask?
Yeah. They tried to get Cher, actually, and if they had, that would bump it up for me, actually, if they'd managed that. I'd still not think it was a good episode.
Was he a mutant, or was he a Frankenstein? I mean, I blocked that episode from my brain.
I think he was created by a mad scientist, because I remember there was a mad scientist. But yeah, it was very much a Frankenstein plot. But I mean, I don't think it was the worst episode, but it's bad, and the badness is harder to ignore because it's really convinced it's good. So yeah, it's just the most memorably bad as opposed to...
Well, it's bad because it's cynical and it's trying to get an Emmy. Yeah. And that's the only reason why I don't like Triangle as much. Because he was trying to do the same thing there.
Yeah. But he at least pulls that off. That's at least a nice, slick episode,
And he filmed it on the QE too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's similar to Buffy, where they start to really get into the concept episodes.
Once more with feeling,
Yeah, and those are often the highlights of the season, but sometimes not. Anyway, I found that cigarette smoking man quote. He says, "Life is like a box of chocolates, a cheap, thoughtless, perfunctory gift that no one ever asks for. Unreturnable because all you get back is another box of chocolates. So you're stuck with mostly undefinable whipped mint cream. Whipped mint crap, sorry. Mindlessly wolfed down when there's nothing else to eat while you're watching the game. Sure, once in a while you get a peanut butter cup or an English toffee, but it's gone too fast and the taste is fleeting. In the end, you're left with nothing but broken bits filled with hardened jelly and teeth-shattering nuts, which, if you're desperate enough to eat, leaves nothing but an empty box full of useless brown paper wrappers. Now, I don't agree about chocolates, but I think he has a point about life. I think that's a pretty good monologue and a great parody of Forrest
Yeah,
Gump.
it's pretty nihilistic.